I'm watching a documentary about the First World War. Now, it's like if humans have to go through regular wars where people just start to destroy each other. I mean, it's insane, but still it seems as if it was some kind of force of nature, like tsunami that all of a sudden hits the human collective mind. Now, there's a story called Mahabharat, written thousands of years ago in India. It's very good to read, and it's really, like you could say, a mythological story in the old sense, where myth didn't mean that it didn't happen and it's just fiction, but in the sense of that what happens in this story totally relates archetypally, you could say, to our lives as humans in general, whether we lived 1,000 years ago or now. And such stories I like because they actually give you something. They can actually contribute to our culture and help us as humans. And this is why such great stories have basically carried cultures through the ages, whether you find them in East or West, China, India, Sweden, or whatever. And there you find that theme in Mahabharata, where basically brothers who should and could be the best of friends get inimical due to weaknesses of character or greed or whatever, but also sometimes very complicated things like giving your loyalty to the right person or the wrong person, and then having to stick to that in order to keep a promise. So there are very deep things there that we all sometimes go through. So it all leads up to an imminent war, a grand war of the wars in those days. And the question is, can the war be avoided? And as we stand here today, that question is as relevant as ever, right? Will there be another war of the wars, another big one? What do you think? What is in your mind regarding that? What do you answer? I know many people who said, yeah, unavoidable, what can you do? Just let's blow everything up and start anew. Or these different kinds of cynical, I would say, ways of looking at it. And I really think that it is this kind of cynicism, the acceptance of the cruel, selfish, brutal nature of the human being that really makes the final allowance for war to happen. Because that thought in your mind, if you had it in your mind when I asked you now, that may become decisive at one point in time between whether you will join the war or decide to simply not take part. Because actually, even when these world wars were going on, they were fought by people like you and me. They were a collective decision made by many people. And that's why, for instance, it's quite well known that if you're a leader of a nation or so, one of the most difficult things is how to motivate your people to go into war, to risk their lives. And they generally make sure somehow or other, always at this point, that something happens where the enemy does something really terrible, and sometimes you don't even know if that was actually caused by the enemy or made to seem that way, and it's tricky sometimes. But anyway, at that point, it is up to each and every one of us. Will I join, or will I just stay out of it? And you can decide, no, I won't do it. I'm not going to go out there and kill my brethren and sisterns. And I mean, for you guys, the big, rich, powerful guys, I'm going to fight for you and die and kill for that. And you might tell me if I don't do it, then you will kill me. Then kill me, then I will be killed anyway. So you can't really ultimately force a person to do something that they don't want to do. We all have that ultimate decision to make for what we do and not. If we decide to stand by what we are convinced is the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, then we are actually heroes. And that's what these stories are about, these old stories. And it's still going on, the story, and we are the characters of the story. And now the question is, what are we going to do this time? It's really about educating ourselves to decide which leaders to follow. Because otherwise we'll be sheep in this herd or that herd, and then just following. Now, what I mean with that, it's not that we're following some Hitler or Stalin or whoever were around in those old days. And frankly speaking, I don't think that many of us would go for that today. It's a little bit obvious, right? But what did those guys do? Well, they managed to gather many people around an idea. Because that's how you lead people. You start with books. Mao wrote his little red one, and Hitler wrote his Mein Kampf, and Marx his Das Kapital. This is how you ultimately rule, by shaping and molding and convincing the minds of people of what is the right thing to do. And then you can step in easily and get them to do it, put them into action. So you may have been living or be living in a country where you have been hearing for the past few decades, or a few years back at least, that the people over there in that other country, they are bad guys and girls. And if you have that thought, then you can just look at yourself right now. Do you have such an image in your mind about a country somewhere on this planet that is really bad? Rogue nation or axis of evil or whatever. Do you? When I think like that, okay, you got North Korea, you got Afghanistan, you had Iraq, but anyway, and there are those popping up there in your mind. And now it's, I guess if you're living in the US especially, you might think it's China. They are bad. And then there's Russia, and then there's China again. It gets a little funny sometimes. What's the use of that? First of all, we all know that the people in those countries, in all countries, are about the same as you and me. I'm just looking at the world from wherever I am right now and asking me this question. Will we this time learn from the past and not make the same mistake again? Will we be able to just continue living in peace? Will we as a species be able to rise above this highly irrational mentality of regularly having wars with each other? Or is this just in our nature that we can't avoid, just like the tide and the seasons? Well, I'm turning back to the Mahabharata, and I'm thinking that if these old scriptures of wisdom are actually reflecting not only historical events that happened somewhere in this space-time, but something much, much bigger and deeper in our collective soul, then there might very well be a development too. That this time Arjuna and Karna will be brothers who finally decide to make peace with each other, embracing each other, saying, let's let go of the past. Or maybe this misunderstanding won't happen. Or are we just talking about a destiny or mistake that will be repeated over and over again indefinitely? Or maybe there's some progress supposed to happen here. So, well, there's an upward spiral, downward spiral, but which spiral we're going to go into here, it really depends on you and me. And this guy talking is just one of us. I mean, come on, what I'm saying here is just completely common sense stuff, right?